MS Now's Laura Hayfley is on the ground at LaGuardia Airport. Also here, Alan Diehl, former FAA scientist and NTSB investigator. Alan, it's good to have you here. The NTSB says the runway will be closed for days because they're sifting through all that debris, but they have found the black boxes. Remind folks what information they'll get from them.
Well, certainly there's two of them. One is the voice recorder. The other is the data recorder. And probably the voice recorder is most critical here to see if the two deceased Canadian pilots had any clue that fire truck was not going to stop. And of course, they may have made a decision, as you saw the wreckage of the fire truck. They hit the center of it. Had they hit the cab, they would have taken out the drivers of the truck, the firemen. So if there's any good news in this, the firemen survived.
Yeah, I would keep hearing it could have been much worse. Let's talk about this investigation and what goes into finding out whether the controller was distracted or if they needed more staffing, frankly, in the control tower.
Well, right now, the NTSB is looking at the factual data. They'll go back and analyze that, trying to come up with the whys and ultimately make recommendations to prevent it from happening again. But right now, I imagine they're waiting to interview the two surviving firemen in the truck, firefighters in the truck. There's a couple of problems that were going on that night before the collision. One was the emergency of the United aircraft that apparently had aborted takeoff a couple times. There was fumes, maybe smoke, and they were using, at one time at least, I believe they used the word emergency. So now the controller has got to deal with getting those trucks across that runway to deal with the United problem. Meanwhile, he's talking to a Frontier aircraft, and he says, stop, 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 to the Frontier aircraft. Now, what the firemen are going to have to ask is, when they heard the stop, 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 did they think perhaps the controller was still talking to the Frontier airline, not to them? This is the kind of thing that the NTSB will have to carefully tease out in their investigation. So it's just beginning.
Yeah, you can see in the heat of the moment how confusing it could be. So, Laura, the vivid audio that struck so many people at home was of the controller saying that he messed up. What his role obviously was in all this will be determined as part of this extensive investigation. But what can you tell us about the investigation? And I think we are expecting, as we said, to hear from officials in just a little while, right?
Yeah, that's correct, and we'll certainly learn a lot more. But as of right now, what we know is that there are several investigative factors that the NTSB is going to be focused on, and those air traffic controllers are certainly going to be one. What were their responsibilities that night? What were they focused on? Why were they distracted? All things that are going to be considered. But Chris, you mentioned a couple others. They did find that black box. There's going to be flight data on there that's going to be crucial to figuring out exactly what was going on that Air Canada plane. Investigators are going to interview people who were on the ground. There's also some environmental factors they're going to consider, including the fact that it was nighttime, and we know that there was fog and mist in the air at the time of this collision. There is lots to do here, and it is a very busy day at the crash site here at LaGuardia. The NTSB chairwoman spoke about some of that. Take a listen.
The question is what is currently happening with that air traffic controller. Typically, they would be removed from duty. And certainly it's pretty traumatic for that air traffic controller as well, and we'll want to interview that air traffic controller as well as others that were in the tower or maybe not even in the tower.
Now, I mentioned it's a busy day at LaGuardia. The tarmac right now, where that crash site is crowded with investigators, not just the NTSB, which we know is leading this investigation, but they're joined by the FAA, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and Transport Canada. Canada's investigators have flown in as well. And the reason why today in particular is busier than yesterday is because we literally could not get the investigators to the crash site. The DHS shut down. was creating long lines at airports. Of course, there was a full ground stop at LaGuardia. Newark Airport, which is nearby, experienced a short ground stop as well. So, Chris, actually getting people on the ground to start this investigation was incredibly difficult. But right now, they're out there on the tarmac, and soon we will know more from investigators in just a short time from now. Chris?
Thank you for that. So, Alan, let me play some of what Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said yesterday. And he was talking about funding for air travel safety.
We need more money for air traffic control. We are modernizing our system, but we can't fully modernize it until the Congress gives us additional money. I'm not saying that this crash would have been prevented if we had all the equipment deployed, but it's important if we care about air travel safety, we care about having a brand new air traffic control system.
How critical is that message as you see it, and what are the chances that the people who control the purse strings are listening?
Well, it's very critical, and I can't speak, obviously, for the Congress, but there's technology out there, and we don't know if they had it at and during this accident. There's actually collision avoidance systems that are available for vehicles, ground vehicles, fire trucks, just like in the aircraft. It's called ADS-B. It's been proven to increase the situational awareness of people like the vehicle drivers, the truck drivers, the fire trucks, and so on. So there's a lot of things that can be done to modernize the equipment, the system. But whether or not Congress is willing to spend the money is a different question. And Secretary Duffy is absolutely right. One thing I would also mention, though, in case your viewers don't know it, during the NTSB investigations, these are no-fault investigations. So anything the controllers or the truck drivers or anybody else says during these investigations can't be used against them by the FAA or in a court of law. So that's very important. The NTSB is trying to get to the bottom of what happened, why it happened, and their independence is so critical. But yeah, the Congress has got to decide whether or not they want to fund the technology as well as the staffing to make this system even more safe. It is safe now. We don't need to panic. You've heard people quote the statistics about 1 chance in 10 million when you board an airliner that you're going to die. You can't get those odds from your surgeon. But anyway, Chris, system is working. It needs to be improved. And certainly this tragedy at LaGuardia illustrates what needs to happen.
Laura Haefele and Alan Diehl, thank you both.